Imagine being kidnapped without even realizing the danger. This was the reality faced by Aundreah Maes, a 19-year-old woman, at the hands of Edwin Lara, a trainee police officer, which led her to live a terrifying experience. It all began when a motel security cameras captured Edwin and Aundreah entering the lobby. At first glance, there didn't seem to be anything out of the ordinary, but on closer inspection, the young woman kept her distance nervously, with her arms crossed. Suddenly, he ordered her to come closer, and she, wiping away a tear, obeyed. What seemed like a common interaction actually concealed an abduction. Edwin, in addition to taking Aundreah hostage, had stolen a car and was leaving a crime spree in his wake. Most disturbingly, he was also responsible for the disappearance of 23-year-old Kaylee Sawyer, who was being intensely sought by police after showing no signs of life. Edwin's wife, Isabel Ponce, also a police officer, discovered damning evidence in their home: Kaylee's belongings hidden in their shed, and the service weapon Edwin had stolen from her. Although authorities began a manhunt, he had already fled, taking Aundreah with him on a trip fraught with threats. On the day of Aundreah's abduction, she was resting in her car when Edwin approached and, at gunpoint, forced her to drive with him. During the drive, he asked her for personal details, and when she resisted, he threatened her with a gun to her thigh, making the gravity of the situation obvious. Despite her terror, Aundreah was undeterred and decided to resist in her own way, defiantly standing up to Edwin, which seemed to disconcert him. After hours of driving, they stopped at a roadside motel. The cameras again caught Edwin calmly booking a room while Aundreah wiped away tears. Inside the room, Edwin forced her to undress and shower in front of him. Aundreah, filled with fear, flatly refused, telling him she would rather die than do his bidding. This adamancy only fueled Edwin's frustration, who finally forced her to take a sleeping pill and pushed her onto the bed. Meanwhile, authorities were still searching for Kaylee Sawyer. Her family, especially her mother, Julie Van Cleve, tried to cling to hope, though every clue led to a dead end. Without a body and with Kaylee's bloody clothes as the only evidence, the search was becoming desperate. Back at the motel, something unexpected happened. Aundreah's phone rang with a pre-programmed alarm. Edwin, paranoid, asked her what it meant. Thinking fast, she lied and told him it was a reminder to take her medication for a sexually transmitted disease. This lie, though risky, was what unnerved Edwin. In a brief moment of distraction, Aundreah Maes saw a glimmer of hope. Edwin, agitated and paranoid, began to fear that the police would catch up with him. He made a call, though it is unclear to whom. As his paranoia grew, Aundreah began to feel that for the first time survival was possible. At dawn, Edwin decided to leave the motel. On their way out, they encountered a photographer named Jack Levy. Edwin, brandishing a gun, demanded his car keys. Although Jack complied, Edwin shot him in the stomach before dragging Aundreah and fleeing. Badly wounded, Jack managed to call for help, providing the police with a decisive lead. Edwin and Aundreah arrived at a gas station where they saw a family in their car. Edwin took them hostage, forcing them to drive. Among the passengers was a 17-year-old boy named Nima, his brother, and his grandmother. And the atmosphere in the car was one of sheer terror as Edwin waved his gun and gave orders. He asked Aundreah to throw the family's phones out the window. She obeyed, but made sure they landed softly on the grass, hoping the police could track them. The grandmother begged Edwin to let them go, and surprisingly, he agreed. He stopped the car, released them, and continued the journey alone with Aundreah. Not long after, police sirens began to wail in the distance. Edwin, feeling the pressure, grabbed Aundreah's phone and began recording himself. He then handed her the phone and at gunpoint, ordered her to post the video on Facebook with a threatening message. While driving at high speed, Edwin called 911, exceeding 120 km/h, weaving between cars and honking his horn. After a 15-minute chase, he suddenly braked, handed the phone back to Aundreah, raised his hands and got out of the car. For the first time since her abduction, Aundreah was left alone and, crying, followed the 911 operator's instructions. However, the situation worsened for Aundreah. Although Edwin made it clear that she was innocent, miscommunication between Oregon and California authorities led to her arrest. She was publicly accused of being an accomplice, and the media spread misinformation. Both were taken to Tehama County Jail, charged with attempted murder, kidnapping, and carjacking. This case exposed one of the biggest mistakes made by Redding authorities. With Edwin behind bars, the crime spree came to an end. However, the aftermath of his actions would last for years. During the investigation, Edwin confessed that he saw Kaylee Sawyer walking alone on the day of her disappearance. He offered her a ride home, but she refused. He then posed as a police officer, wearing his campus security guard uniform, which was very similar to that of a real officer. When Kaylee tried to escape, Edwin forced her into his car, which had a grilled back seat like a police vehicle. He drove her to a secluded location, and by the time Kaylee regained consciousness, it was too late to change her fate. Edwin related that Kaylee Sawyer, upon awakening, struggled desperately to call for help, honking the horn and trying to use the radio, knowing what awaited her. At that point, Edwin sexually assaulted her, and after a violent struggle, ended her life by striking her with a 60 to 70-pound rock. The details of the murder shocked authorities, and the prosecution sought the death penalty. Kaylee's parents filed a lawsuit against the college that hired Edwin, alleging negligent background checks and lack of psychological evaluation. They won the case, and through their efforts, Kaylee's law was enacted, prohibiting untrained security personnel from using police-grade equipment on campuses. Despite the pain, Kaylee's family turned her tragedy into a fight for the safety of other young people. The legal victory and the creation of the law offered them solace, although the emotional toll continued. Aundreah Maes, a victim of Edwin's kidnapping, also had to deal with her own trauma. Throughout her captivity, she witnessed Edwin's crimes and did not know if she would survive. However, years later, Andrea demonstrated incredible strength and became a voice for survivors, refusing to be seen as a victim. One of the most remarkable moments occurred when Andrea, with the support of Kaylee's family, confronted Edwin at the trial. During the final day, she addressed him directly, telling him, "You've tried to make me look weak, a victim, but I am not." Andrea proudly declared that she was a survivor, a warrior who had withstood the darkness into which Edwin tried to plunge her. Her words resonated beyond the courtroom, inspiring many who heard her story. Not only did Andrea find comfort in Kaylee's family, but they also developed an extraordinary bond. Their shared pain brought them together, and together they found a way to heal. Kaylee's mother, in particular, learned to focus on the joy her daughter had given her. "I love her more and more every day, just like I did when she was here," she said. Her ability to smile when remembering Kaylee instead of just crying was a beacon of hope for others affected by the tragedy. The impact of Edwin's crimes also affected Nima and her family, who were taken hostage by him. Although the trauma they suffered was profound, they managed to move on. Jack Levy, the photographer who encountered Edwin in the motel parking lot and was wounded, also survived and was able to move on with his life. Another example of the resilience of the human spirit. Through the stories of Aundreah, Kaylee's family, and the others involved, a common theme was reflected: survival and recovery. Although Edwin's terror left scars, those who survived found a way to heal and move on. If you liked this story, subscribe and like so you don't miss the next video. See you next case.